when you look for this type of information, there's kind of an echo chamber and you keep hearing the same thing everywhere you look, and you're looking for something a little different flavor to your conservation stories, maybe a little bit more truth and authenticity in them. Redbandia Outdoors is the place that you should come. So the spawning is reduced. The spawning area, the area available to spawn in, has reduced. And so that's the dilemma on the Deschutes. All right, thanks for tuning in, everyone. This is Redbandia Outdoors. I'm Scott, fish biologist turned YouTuber, living the dream, being the star of my own fishing show on TV. The great thing about that is I get to create my own fishing show, like I said, my channel. That fishing show is going to have obviously some great fishing on it, which you've seen, some great access and opportunity videos. But I also want to get into conservation of the resource, and a lot of those stories and a lot of that information that you're really not seeing from the other conservation groups and reporting that's out there. So if you feel like when you look for this type of information, there's kind of an echo chamber and you keep hearing the same thing everywhere you look, and you're looking for something a little different flavor to your conservation stories, maybe a little bit more truth and authenticity in them, Redbandia Outdoors is the place that you should come. Now this is just some Gatorade or Powerade that I use to get your attention in my thumbnail, but it signifies an important piece of what we're going to talk about today. And that's the water in this lake in the incredible Hulk green, that color that it turns here later in the summer. You can see it starting right now. It's July 17th. In another month, this thing will kind of look like what's in this bottle. So if this is the kind of information you want to get to, information you're not finding anywhere else, and you want to support my channel, one way to do that is to smash that like button, smash that subscribe button, put a comment in there, tell me what you're thinking, tell me how I'm doing, because that sends a signal to both me and YouTube that you like this stuff and I should make more of it. So what I'm going to talk about today is the dilemma on the Deschutes. I'm going to get into it real good here in a second, but if you like this video, hit those buttons and I'll produce another video where I talk about this same issue, crazy water quality management, that if we would just be following our own rules, we'd have no problem protecting salmon and steelhead in Oregon's greatest wild salmon and steelhead river. I'll get to that video later this summer, but you guys smash that like button. You let me know what you think about this. I really appreciate your time. Let's get into it. All right, so I'm here in Lake Billy Chinook, Oregon. I jokingly call this spot the headwaters of the Deschutes because it's where three rivers, the Deschutes, the Metolius to the west, the Deschutes from the south, and the Crooked from the east, come together and they form Lake Billy Chinook. All these systems, or both of these systems, the Crooked and the Deschutes, have reservoirs in them as well. The Metolius comes out of a big groundwater artesian spring system at the base of the east slope of the Cascades and flows into the Metolius, or flows into the lake here, creating a great cold water reservoir in the bottom of the lake. So what I want to talk about, I need to go back a little bit in time to set this up. So I have other videos talking about the bull trout that you can catch in this lake standing at the same spot. I'll put the thumbnail up right here, but that video is going to give a little bit more in-depth background of what we're talking about here with the stuff you see behind me, but I'm going to touch on it real quick just to make sure everyone that's watching this video knows where we're at. So what you see behind me is Round Butte Dam. The structure floating off of it is called a selective water withdrawal, and there's a pipe that goes all the way down to the bottom about 350 feet of the lake that's called the selective water withdrawal. And the piece on top is called the fish facility. Now, those two pieces were not here when this dam was completed in 1964. Keep in mind, this is Round Butte Dam. It's over 500 feet tall. It's one of the 25th largest dams in our country. And there's two dams below it. There's Pelton Dam, which creates another reservoir, and there's a re-regulating dam below that, which allows the river to come out at a constant flow. So when you turn on your washing machine at home or your AC when you get home from work, the river's not doing this as we demand and not demand power. And that's pretty standard for rivers here in the western United States. Not everyone has this type of system, but they all have some kind of mechanisms to keep that flow steady rather than peak powering it up and down. That's not the issue I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about is this 3-dam complex was relicensed around 2008 by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So large hydroelectric facilities in our country are managed with 50-year licenses by the federal government. And when those licenses come up, there's a whole new set of questions asked about how to operate that dam and how the next 50 years is going to look. Here in the Pacific Northwest, a lot of our dams were very impactful on migratory fish, anadromous fish, salmon and steelhead, Pacific salmon in general. They took a big hit. Everybody knows that. The Deschutes River is very interesting in the sense that it's an eastern Oregon, central Oregon, desert river that has robust populations of salmon and steelhead in it, as well as resident fish, redband trout, bull trout. So when this dam came up for a relicensing in 2008 or 2004, they started working on it. One of the major issues that was in discussion was reintroducing salmon and steelhead above the dam. Now, in the other video I mentioned, I go into more detail about all this, but basically we deemed the current or the fish passage both up and down at that time was insufficient to keep the population here, and we lost the population above the dam. So from 1964, 1970, there was no more salmon and steelhead above this facility, and for that period of time up until the new license came, there was nothing other than the resident fish. So the new license put the note in there that says you got to reintroduce fish above the dam. The second piece was the water quality. And now any of those of you that follow what dams do to rivers, what they do is they insulate them, which basically means that they become warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer by creating this big pool of water behind the dam that we release from. And generally speaking, we release water that's cooler in the summertime, and that same temperature water then becomes warmer in the winter as wintertime comes and things get really cold. And that was an issue here on the Deschutes, and the scientists involved with the relicensing effort, they determined that this was 2 degrees Celsius warmer than it should have been. Now, I know that's got a lot of groups and people and anglers up in arms. And why are we warming up a river when climate change is beating down on us? Didn't seem like a very smart move. I'm going to leave that one alone. And I'm going to say, guys, the more impactful issue with the relicensing of this dam on the salmon and steelhead below the facility was the water quality. It's the incredible Hulk green water that forms in this lake due to the sunlight that beats down on it and the leaching of the parent materials from the geology, the volcanic geology on the landscape, whether it's a tributary stream, a river that comes down, or the fact that that river bakes in 2 or 3 reservoirs in the case of the Deschutes, or the Crooked, we capture it, sit it in a giant reservoir like Prineville Reservoir, then release it down through an agricultural valley into this reservoir. This water has soaked up the parent geology, the nutrients from it. It's highly volcanic. And when you put it in a place like this in the lake, and you put 365 days of sun on it, especially in the summertime, you get this biological soup, right? So you understand how lakes work, right? The cold air sinks, or the cold water sinks to the bottom, the warm stuff's on top. So in the summertime, we have a pretty solid layer of incredible Hulk green biological soup out here in the lake. It's filled with all kinds of stuff. I was down at the boat ramp this morning. I ran into the state parks employee who was testing the water because a lot of swimming, wakeboarding and stuff go on down there. This kind of biological soup can have the toxic bacteria in it that can make you sick. It can kill your dog and can do bad stuff, right? So they test the water and they put out alerts when they're hitting levels that are they need to notify the public for. So that person was down there doing his thing. It's still fairly early in the summertime. We haven't had a crazy hot summer yet. And the levels are still pretty good. There's a lot of people having fun on the lake. It's not as green as it can get, and it doesn't have that smell that when you go down there, that happens here in the next 3 to 4 weeks. That person didn't want to get on camera to talk about this stuff, and I didn't really bug them about it. They're just doing their job testing the water to make sure it's okay for you to go have fun. And it's totally okay to have fun. And most of the time it is. But we do get these intense blooms, and you see this in other lakes around here in Central Oregon, where we get these intense blooms. And they have to warn you that that water has stuff in it that can be harmful to humans and pets. And so back to the river, to warm up the river, you know, you think about the river, trout season in the river downstream here starts on the 3rd Saturday in April for the first 50 miles. And then below that, it's open all year. But when that river starts to warm up around the first part of May, we need to pull some water off the lake that's a little warmer than the stuff on the bottom. And so for a long, long time, 40 years, we pulled stuff off the bottom, and that's the way the Deschutes ran. So now with the new license to warm it up, we've got to get some warmer water, just like a shower. When you're turning the knobs, you know, you add a little bit more cold, it's going to cool off. You release the cold, turn the hot, it's going to warm up. You know, you get the picture. Same thing here. But when we go get that warmer water, it's higher up in the lake, and it's got that biological soup in it, right? And so what happens is then also when the lake turns over and all those nutrients start mixing in the lake and we start pumping even some of the water from the bottom, we're pumping a lot more of that nutrient down the lake, right? Or down the river. And that was the big change that occurred in 2008 with the relicensing effort. We're going to release and introduce salmon and steelhead above the reservoir up here. That's a science project. We're going to change the temperature of the river because we've insulated it for 40 years. We need to make it flow the temperature that it should. So there's a big analytical effort on that, what the temperature should be. Came out to 2 degrees warmer. And then the third piece was the water quality element, which is the dissolved oxygen, the pH, and all the other water chemistry issues or elements that work down below the river that are listed in the water quality standards of our state. Like any other state has water quality standards that are part of their adherence to the Clean Water Act, the federal legislation that I feel separates us from the first and third world countries, right? We understand clean water is very, very important. And so we have regulations and standards to hit that. This dam wanted to come a bit more in line with that, with temperature and some of the water chemistry. And so that's what I want to talk about. This biological soup, this incredible Hulk green water going down the river, it's like supercharged fertilizer for a river like that. Supercharged natural fertilizer for a river like that when you put it in a canyon that heats up with rock walls, sun beating down on it, and it rolling over ripples and rapids for 100 miles. And so I've lived here for over 20 years and I've been fishing that river, and you kind of have that Rolodex of images in your head. And so one of the things the Deschutes River has been known for a long time is the rocks are real slippery, right? There's got this diatoms on it. There's just tough wading out there. Even on the small gravels, they're real slippery. And so one of the things that I'm going to show you when we go down to the river here in a few minutes is I'm going to show you what this incredible Hulk biological soup water does when you put it in the river. Now, I'm not sure that when we did the relicensing effort, we put a whole scientific team on studying what the impact of this was. But I feel very confident in standing in front of you here today to say that the impact of that water going down that river and the stuff that I'm going to show you here in a second, when we head down to the river, I think it's going to really make you understand the impact that we're dealing with and what we have to face to the future to figure out how to manage this river so we can make it and keep it what it is and what it used to be. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there with a lot of different opinions on stuff. I like to base my opinions on fact, analysis, and observation. I'm not one to go out there and just repeat what everyone else is saying just because it sounds good. So the stuff you hear me talking about in this video, you know, it might get the attorneys for PG or the tribe sitting straight up in their chair. It's stuff that I've seen with my own eyes, heard with my own ears, in touch with my own hands, and dealt with in a long career at fisheries biology here in the area. So I'm just here to report to you guys because I think independent journalism, where you get the real story, not one filtered through who pays the bills, if you know what I mean, is very important. So stick with me. Let's head down to the river. I've got that part to show you. And then after that, we're going to head back to the office and we're going to talk a little bit more detail. We're going to talk about stream restoration a little bit and some stuff you guys should be thinking about. So thank you. Appreciate your time, and I'll see you down at the river. All right, now we're down here on the river, and this is a spot that you can come yourself and see this stuff that I'm going to talk about for yourself. We're right here along the highway. This is one of the most popular spots to fish on the Deschutes. If you've ever been to the Deschutes and you've gone to Bend, Oregon, and you flew into Portland, you've driven by here more than likely, you might have fished this spot. This is a very popular spot. I call it the guardrail. Other people have different names for it. There's always someone fishing here. This is one of those areas where I talk about the red trampling occurring. I would consider most of this area trampled by fishermen. It's unfortunate. Again, that's where I learned to just use the spinning rod and stay here along the bank. And that's what I want to talk to you about here with the dilemma on the Deschutes. I'm right here along the bank line, and you can see hopefully some of this vegetation that's growing in right here, right? Now I'm going to take you underwater here in a second and show you that stuff. But I wanted to talk about the spawning, and the reason why I fished the spin rod is because I've noticed over the years that when the flows are right and the gravel's clean, there can be a lot of spawning right tight to the bank here. You come down here opening day, and most of this bank, especially the lower portion down here, which has an undercut to it, down deeper, down along by those boulders, you know, they're spawning in there. Redband, steelhead are spawning in the spring. Fall Chinook had spawned in there just as it closed in the fall, in the end of October into December. So there's eggs in all this gravel out here, right? The thing that I've been noticing, and that's why I'm here to talk to you about the dilemma on the Deschutes, and we'll get a little picture of this, is hopefully you can see some of this green vegetation growing there in my shadow. Maybe you can see it out there. We'll take you underwater here in a second. But you see all the nice spawning habitat out there, the riffles. Those are all dunes caused by heavy, intense spawning of salmon. But this green vegetation and a lot of this other algae and macrophytic vegetation, large aquatic plants, has really, really increased in abundance and its vigor growing into the gravel ever since we made the changes and we've been putting the green, incredible Hulk water down here on the Deschutes. Now, I know there's a lot of people that are up in arms about all that. I understand the concern. The Deschutes is one of our most precious resources. It's an amazing river. There's really nothing like it. I haven't really figured it out, what's good, what's bad. But what I can tell you is this looks like a serious problem to me, because what I've noticed over time is that the spawning that's occurred along this bank here and in these areas where the gravel has been overtaken by the spawning has reduced. So the spawning is reduced. The spawning area, the area available to spawn in, has reduced. And so that's the dilemma on the Deschutes. I'm going to show you another patch of green stuff right here. I don't have my rod to stick the camera in today because I just came down for a little fun fish. And I found exactly what I was looking for. About a 3-meter swath along the bank here where the current's slow. We've basically got aquatic vegetation growing 12 months out of the year now, and it's not very good spawning habitat anymore. Let me push you down here in the water, get you in the right spot so you can see that. Now, I'm hoping GoPro did a good job, and that's a crystal clear picture of what you're getting. Here's what it looks like a little shallower up. took you for a little deeper drive there through it to show you how thick, matted, and grown in it is. Right here you can see some of the gravel that's underneath it and what we used to see quite a bit. And that's that juicy spawning gravel right here along the bank. Now when you came down here on opening day, which is the third Saturday in April, you would see big reds carved in here. You would see a big dip, you would see a big spawning tail spill where the eggs were put. If you just stood on the bank and nymphed with your fly rod, you would maybe catch a spawner. You know, they're all through here. And so the dilemma on the Deschutes has now become this conservation effort that we've done with the new license has brought in all this aquatic vegetation, and the closer you get to the dam, the worse it is. Now the dam's not very far up, a few miles, but this goes down quite a few ways like this because there isn't a lot of tributary action and a lot of high flows every year like you might find in a Rocky Mountain river or a non-dammed river where we push this stuff out. Now I know the Deschutes is a peculiar river. It has a great base flow, and the high flow situation is a little different than other rivers, but the reality is high flows would come through here and help clean this out, and they're obviously not. Here's another really good patch of it right here. Let me show you that. Now that stuff's really thick. Not every spot was spawned on, and not every spot remains like this through the winter, but we've had them. Sorry about the cars. I told you can come here yourself and check this out and see what you think. Make your own opinion with the information that I've given you. Spawning area on the Deschutes River, in my opinion, is being reduced. Now when we have low flows in Trout Creek because of climate change and just a pattern of weather that's not delivering the snowpack to that watershed and the flows that it used to, and we've documented that, we're having a complete major reduction in the production of Trout Creek just because of the availability of habitat due to water quantity in the system. And that means spawning habitat has been reduced. So when you have spawning habitat being reduced in your number one tributary, where are they going to come? They're going to come back to the main river that's full of water like this, because for a fish, that's basic common sense for a fish. And so when they come back to the river here to spawn, a lot of that spawning habitat now is filled up with other fish that could be in the tributary, and it's also filled up with this vegetation that I'm showing you on the beds. This is one of the major spawning areas. It's the middle of July right now. This is largely covered over with this stuff in some of these areas, and it remains to be seen whether that will be available for spawning in the fall for Chinook and in the spring for steelhead and redband. If you don't believe me, like I said 3 times already, come out here and check it out for yourself. Make your own opinion, make your own observations. Don't be a cheerleader just because you have a phone and have Instagram and you can say what someone else said. Come and check it out, get the information for yourself, ask the questions. So there's an additional dilemma that occurred on Trout Creek that I want to talk about, and I'm going to take you there back to the office. We're going to look at a few slides and do a little bit more critical thinking on this dilemma on the Deschutes. So thanks for sticking with me. This was a real impromptu, get out here on the river, drop the camera in the water and tell you what I'm seeing. So I hope you like this. Stick with me. We'll be back at the office. All right, we're back here at the office. We want to talk Trout Creek. Trout Creek is the most important spawning tributary for steelhead in the Deschutes River below the Pelton Round Butte hydroelectric project. Now I'm going to go through a few slides here. I'm going to pull them up on my computer so I can kind of track through my discussion, but I'll be putting them up on the screen here as I'm talking to let you guys in on the discussion I think is important with Trout Creek. So let's get started. First off, I wanted to open up just a general vicinity map and show you guys kind of where we are. You know, the blue
that's the general position of Trout Creek. It comes out of the Ochoco Mountains, which are to the east of the Deschutes River, kind of eastern central Oregon, a desert mountain range, reaches about 5,500 feet, somewhere in there, and flows on out to the west, crosses a highway, and then drops down into the Deschutes Canyon and makes its way to the Deschutes. There's one major tributary that has steelhead in it. That's Antelope Creek. And the blue lines you see here, they're not the whole watershed by any means, the whole drainage area. I'd imagine this drainage area is close to about 1,000 miles, square miles. But this is the area where steelhead inhabit. This is the steelhead distribution, basically, the blue line that I've drawn on there. It gets up into the Ochoco Mountains, at least the foothills of them. And then, of course, there's a migratory path down to the canyon. So let's switch to the next slide, which is a little bit more detailed and kind of show you some of the stuff that I've been talking about in the entire video, more a general location map. Things I want you to point out to you on this map are the three rivers coming into the lake. Over there to the west, to the left of the photo, you'll see the three-pronged lake that I was standing at. The first big arrow, the green stuff, the lime. The first arrow, that's where I was standing by the dam. The second arrow in the middle there, that's the second dam. And then the third arrow down there, that's the re-regulating dam. And then you can see the river flowing out there to the north. And then, of course, Trout Creek, as I showed you before. And then there's those red circles on there. And then, of course, Redbandia. That's what I want to get into in a little bit more depth. So just in general, the circles that are on there, the lower part down here is generally a migratory corridor. And I want to talk about a project that occurred down there when I follow up here. And then the small circle there in the middle is a new area where the land trust, local land trust, has picked up a piece of private property that was in agriculture. It's a very wide valley bottom segment. There's a lot of great opportunity there to build some good habitat. And there's some, seems like there's some good base flow, some upwelling springs in the upper end of that property. That'd be a good thermal refugia for the summertime. So that's why I circled that. Great opportunity in the Deschutes, or the Trout Creek area for the Deschutes population of steelhead. The middle large circle there is near the town of Ashwood. That's another wide valley segment where there's some agriculture going on, farming. And so there's opportunities there. They've been doing a lot of work over the years in the Ashwood area on the steelhead habitat, the stream channel shape, the pattern, the profile, the dimension, to get more of a floodplain connected channel where there's all total suite of habitat for steelhead in the Trout Creek watershed. It's a great place to be working. And then, of course, the upper tributaries where they all connect, higher up in the mountain where there's more water, perennial water in the system throughout the year before it hits the agricultural lands downstream. That's the area I like to call the kind of the heartbeat of Redbandia, this type of habitat. Redbandia we'll get into in another video what it is, but it's basically just a cool way to talk about a very interesting fish state of mind. This place, this fairyland place where steelhead and resident redband both spawn, and when they're born they live in a stream and they have a choice to either stay in the stream forever or go to the ocean and become a steelhead. And so I kind of created this fairyland world with a name for it with Redbandia. And so the place where Redbandia really exists is not down in the deep canyon desert channels that could dry out in the lower sections of Trout Creek, where irrigation and just the low flows in the summertime, the channel gets really low. That's not a place where fish are going to spend their whole time. They're going to be up higher up in the system where there's more perennial water coming out of the mountain springs and things like that. So Redbandia exists in a lot of systems around the Columbia Basin. It's a very large area landscape where this type of fish behavior, this population of mid-Columbia steelhead, middle Columbia steelhead exists. That's the middle of the Columbia River, and the Deschutes River flows in kind of to the middle of the Columbia River, and the Endangered Species Act kind of identified them as a special population. And so they interact with redband trout in this area. and you can either be a red band or a steelhead. So I circled that spot up at the top. I put the big arrow there, Redbandia, for some fun, just to give you guys an insight into a more in-depth video I want to do and talk about that. And I'll show you a cool picture of what Redbandia looks like here right at the end. So those are the things I wanted to point out. Now that I have the circles on the map there, you know, you've got some opportunity, you've got some hardcore places in the middle where that's the core population, a big wide valley segment where the core, you know, spawning areas and big floodplain side channels, that type of stuff. And then of course you have the cold water refugia higher up where the fish can be moving in there in the summertime. You know, fish do a lot of different things, but that's maybe a general pattern of some steelhead in Trout Creek migrate up to the spawning grounds. Do your business, have the eggs turn into juveniles, and then move on into the thermal refugia and hang on for a few years, and then you can migrate out. So if you want to learn more about Trout Creek, what I'm going to put in the description is just a couple links to some of the funded projects that are in Trout Creek doing the fish counting as well as the habitat work. And that'll allow you to kind of dive in and get a little bit more information for yourself, so you're more informed out there when you're sticking up for the steelhead here in Deschutes River. So moving on, now that you've got a pretty good idea of where we're at on the planet, let's look below the highway. There's an interesting element here that I want to talk about. I want to go back to the license for the dam. So when the dam was relicensed, you know, this was done through the FERC process, as I talked about in the beginning of the movie. They established all these marks and measures that the new license needs to meet, of which, you know, habitat restoration and reintroducing the fish were marquee pieces, as well as the water quality elements we talked about. But one of the other things that they were working on was creating a new boundary for where the FERC license exists, and that kind of is a map that sits with the FERC license, the way that I understand it. And it's a place where the licensees, PG and the tribes now running the project, can spend money directly on the project inside those areas. And one of the things they wanted to do was that upper area, that wide agricultural valley, kind of the core population area near Ashwood, Oregon, they wanted to, I think originally the discussions were, is to make that inside the map so they could make some good investments in there, some heavy investments to help the steelhead out, because Trout Creek is one of the only in the main place below the dam where steelhead spawn in the tributary of the Deschutes. A lot of them do spawn in the river, but the tributary populations are fairly limited in this desert environment, and Trout Creek's definitely the biggest, most robust one. Some years we have close to 1,000 steelhead spawning in there, and when we have good water conditions, we can get up to 100,000 smolts, juvenile steelhead moving out, you know. But when we're in drought conditions like we are, you know, we're down to a tenth of that. Because fish aren't going to find the available habitat. There's not enough available habitat to produce that many out migrants, and so on. So PG, the licenses, the whole relicensing project recognized this. They recognized that big wide valley bottom segment midway up the Trout Creek watershed is a very important area to invest in. They want to continue investing in it and help the steelhead. Something fell through on that deal. The landowners, you know, whatever it was, it didn't go down, so that never happened. And instead, they purchased a piece of property. You might know about it. It's on your way down to the Trout Creek boat ramp when you go down there. Fishing is the Trout Creek Ranch. They picked up a sizable piece of property. I have a portion of it here circled on the slide that I'm showing you guys. I want to just bring you your attention to the Trout Creek Ranch and some of the work that was done there, because I think now that we've seen Trout Creek, or I've seen it for 20 years now, and people have been working on it for way longer than that, there's been a large investment for Trout Creek, probably for 40 plus years, 35 years, I would say. It's highly manipulated creek from top to bottom, you know. Settlers and ag and highways and roads and forestry, they've all been in there kind of doing what they need to do to get the creek kind of tamed, so to speak. This is a very flashy system, if you can imagine. We get a lot of, say, snowpack and then rain or heavy thunderstorms, so the stream's very flashy. There's lots of indicators of that. You'll see some in the pictures I'm going to show you here. Trout Creek Ranch was purchased by PG and the tribes as part of the mitigation process and the new license for the dam, and it's down near the mouth. It's in the migratory corridor of Trout Creek, where we probably don't see a whole lot of spawning at all. We may see some rearing, say, in the wintertime, we get a big push of water that moves a bunch of fish around, juvenile fish, and they get pushed down here, the water's cold enough, they can do some rearing, you know, but it's generally, for the most part, you know, for 80% of the steelhead or more using Trout Creek, it's probably a migratory corridor for fish moving up and a migratory corridor for fish moving down. It gets very, very dry in the summertime. You know, it's low in the watershed, well below all the irrigation, so everyone that has a water right has taken their water out. There's not a whole lot of upwelling in Trout Creek like we see in the Deschutes River, which is rather interesting. You'd think there'd be a section of Trout Creek down by the canyon where there would be a lot of that good groundwater coming in. I don't know if that necessarily exists. What you see is a lot of surface water irrigation return flow, I think, to the creek. It comes in pretty warm, makes it tough for, excuse me, steelhead to rear down there in the summertime. So anyway, the Trout Creek Ranch, I'm going to switch to some photos. They did some work on it early on in the license, and it's in the PGE report that I'm going to try and link, or at least link the name of the stuff you guys can look up. It's real easy to find. But this is PGE's own reporting of the work they did on Trout Creek, and there's 3 photos in there that I wanted to draw your attention to, because this is where we get down and kind of to the nitty gritty. We stop talking about the general, hey, the algae's getting on the bed, you know, covered in the spawning gravel. You know, this is where we get down to more specific type of river restoration discussions, and what do you do and what has been done and what might be the solution be. Well, this section of Trout Creek, you can read the report. They're going to talk about what they feel like the deficiencies were. It's been affected by the 1964 flood, which is largely the flood of record on most of the streams around here. Still, we've had 64 and 96 are the floods of record around here. And when you get on the Cascades on the west side, you have more recent ones, like 2007, I think, is a big one. But anyway, this channel had become very dished out, very shallow, and very wide. And it was trying to recover from that. And PGE and so forth, they felt like they wanted to do some restoration on it to speed it up. So they did the work that you see here. On the left, you see the original photo. In the middle, you see kind of what they did. If you can pick it out, you see some log jams, which I'll show you. And then you see a channel carved in there. And then on the right, you see it at a wintertime high flow, like I was talking about. You know, we get some rain, we get some snow, it melts, it cools off, we get some snow back on top of that. You get these high flows, these multiple peaks during the early winter and late winter, and maybe you get a little bit of a snow melt runoff during the springtime for the steelhead to go up there and do their business, and then the juveniles get the rest of the water. Well, there was some interesting stuff that we learned from this project, because as you know, I'm a fish biologist. I worked around here for quite some time, and we participated in a tour of all of us doing restoration in all the streams around here. And we went to Trout Creek, and one of the things we saw was, after this project, we had a robust run of steelhead come up the river, and we had it timed with a very low dry year. I think it was probably around 2012, 11. I don't remember the exact dates, but we had good steelhead and low water. And we had this wide channel that wasn't much deeper than, say, your shin, mostly, you know. And what was documented was this robust run of wild steelhead coming up the river, with eagles picking them off when they could get their claws into them and taking them out of the river, you know, removing them from the population. And I was like, wow, this is crazy. You know, like, we have nature going on here. We have restoration that potentially, you know, that was played part into this. And so there's quite a bit of learning to go on here, and something to really remember and figure out how to incorporate into our restoration projects. And so I've had 20 years to think about that or so. And I want to go through with you what is in my head now, and some of the things to watch out for as we try to put the love back into Trout Creek and make sure that steelhead get what they deserve. So let's look at some time-lapse photography. This is simple Google Earth. This is me just telling you what I see and giving you some ideas to think about and consider as you're becoming an ambassador for steelhead, or thinking about how to be a better ambassador for steelhead in the Deschutes River. These type of things apply anywhere you're going to be talking river restoration or working on the creek for fish. So let's go in here, and what I did is I opened up Google Earth. I kind of showed you guys where we were generally on the planet, and I made that circle down there, that portion of the creek, right? So I'm going to put up a slide here from Google Earth. One of the cool things about Google Earth is you can roll back the time and look at the pictures back in time. Some sites have 10, 15 different sets of pictures for you to look back. Some of the clarity might not be that good, but I've gotten back to 1994. And so when you can look at 1994, I'm going to put it up on the screen here. You can see that, yeah, Trout Creek's pretty much a dished out channel. It looks like there's a lot of energy that goes through there. It looks like it's been, there's not a whole lot of brush along the sides. You know, it's definitely that sagebrush that we saw in the pictures of current time that I've showed you. You know, it's very dry. But the one thing I do notice here in this picture is definitely a single thread, some kind of low flow channel set down into that main floodplain and that larger channel that takes up that huge flood flow that I showed you. There's something in there that whenever this was taken, this looks like it was taken in June, it says, of 1994. There's a low flow channel there that's allowing water to go through, and say maybe any fish that were going to try and make a run for it in June, there was water in a channel for them to do that. And so moving up to the next photo I have, I jump all the way up to 2011. So this was after the project that I talked about, where we widened out that channel and we put a larger inset channel in there for some reason. And this is 2011. That project was done in 2009. So this is 2011. And in there you can see large log jams in the corners. There's probably about 5 or 6 of them in there, and the stream somewhat trying to meander back and forth around them. You can see the creation of a large pool around that log jam from the scouring. And then you can see that the channel is wide, right? You can see clearly that it's wide, and it stays pretty wide throughout. You know, we're not seeing any narrowing down and pushing it into a pool and then widening out and the tail out and then widening through the riffle and then narrowing down again into the log jam. It's staying pretty wide. And the width seems to be pretty consistent throughout. But there's water in it. And this is in August. There's some water in there. But it seems to be pretty shallow and spread out across the floodplain. So moving on, let's go to the next one, which is 2019. And then so by 2019, another 7 or 8 years later, you start to see the vegetation start poking back in. Now this photo, you can see it more full of water. This is in April. So this is when steelhead are spawning. They've probably moved up the river. This is a good flow. In 2019, we have good water, it looks like, and fish are able to move up there. I can't tell how deep it is, you know. So I don't know how long this condition of fish struggling to get through the extreme low flows to get up to the spawning areas, to get up to Redbandia existed for. It's just a concern of mine because now in 2024, when we look at the channel, we know we're full bore climate change. Everybody's telling us that climate change is worse than we expected. The lines of climate change are steeper and they're progressing faster than we ever predicted. And I think a lot of us are seeing that on the landscape. And one of the crazy places that I'm concerned about that is Trout Creek, right? Because fish need water. Trout Creek's generally drying out. We're using some water for irrigation, and so that makes it tough on fish, right? When there's limited water coming from the watershed, we're continuing to use it. The fish want it. It gets to be tough. So every move that we make with restoration is amplified in this situation because our availability to water can be limited. Now, I know there's conservation's effort out there to talk to irrigators, to make efficiencies in the irrigation systems, to improve water flow. But in the reality, we're getting small drops of water, a CFS here, 5 CFS there. You know, those make differences for rearing fish and things like that. But to fill these channels up with water again, it's going to be tough. So we're going to be moving into a drier situation, a drier future for Trout Creek. And so I think that's still fine for steelhead, but one of the things we need to do is consider the channel shape when we build them. So in 1994, before we started really messing with stuff in that area, there was that one single thread channel. I think that's what we need to go to in this area. At least if you build a floodplain, you need to lower it, have a channel down in there that captures that base flow and make sure there's migratory passage at all times, even if we have a very low runoff period and a high steelhead run. And one way to do that is to have the hydrologist with the project do the analytics and get into flow duration. Understand how long these certain flows last in the creek. Now, sure, we have a lot of water. It peaks, comes right back down 2 days later, 3 days later. It went all over the floodplain. It moved a bunch of stuff around, but now we're back down to another way lower flow, and then we're kind of dropping or we're sustaining. On high drought years when there's no snowpack, we might not even see that bump. And so our flow of most duration, the highest frequency flow, could be very, very low. And we want to make sure that that's down in the channel. So these steelhead, and if that's occurring in April and March, when we didn't have any runoff because the snowpack was low and we didn't get a lot of precipitation, we want to make sure that's down the channel so we're not inhibiting steelhead from getting up to the spawning grounds of Redbandia, where they're going to birth the young and they're going to decide whether they become a steelhead or a red band kind of thing, right? We need to get them through there. So in the 2024 picture, you can see naturally, hopefully, the channel is coming back to that thread. Maybe it's hard to see here. This one here is in June. So I know the last few years have been pretty dry around here. So we're not even seeing the connected flow easily in this photo. That doesn't mean it's not there. You see the scour around the log jams, and you see some channel developing in that. But the question really I have is, how wide is that? You know, is that too wide? This property has restrictions to get down and walk on it because of nesting birds and private property and all stuff like that. So I didn't want to make this video down there. I wanted to do this from the computer so I could have these slides and show you this stuff. But if it's too wide and too shallow and steelhead aren't able to get to the spawning grounds and the rearing areas, that's going to be an issue. That's going to force them back to the river. And then they're going to be spawning in the shag carpet that I showed you before. So if you don't understand that, I'll explain it one more time. You know, if they're looking to go here and here isn't really good and they can't make it there because of low water, high temperatures, tough challenges to get there, they're going to back down to the river where there's a lot of water. That's just kind of fish common sense. They're going to try to spawn there. There's going to be more of them spawning there in a limited spawning area because it's covered with the shag carpet that I'm going to show you. I just pulled out a video from me fishing the same spot so I can show you about 3 years ago, I believe, how clean the rocks were and then what they are today. It's amazing. So stick around for that video. But the last thing I want to show you guys is what Redbandia really looks like. And so this photo that I'm popping up here, this isn't from Trout Creek, but this is in Redbandia. This is a steelhead red. You can see the gravels turned over there, pushed up into that tailspill where the eggs are. You can imagine two steelheads sitting under that log jam and doing their thing and digging a red and fertilizing it into the gravels there, high up in the mountains after the snow is melted. And those fish are going to rise out in 90 days or so, 100 days, and come into a nice cold stream high up in the mountains where they can rear until they're 4 to 6 inch juvenile and then migrate out to the ocean and come back. So when I think of Redbandia, this photo here really, really signifies what Redbandia is. So I want to thank you guys for watching. This is one of my longer videos. This is a conservation video that I'd like to add to my portfolio, stuff like this. Water quality, I've got some awesome stuff coming up. The next video is going to be even better, more engaging, more on the edge of, hey, let's get the real story out there. So I appreciate you watching. Give me that thumbs up if you liked what you got here. Give me that comment, tell me what you're thinking, and surely subscribe so I know you want to see more of this. I appreciate your time, and I'll see you out there on the river.